Welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogram Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. I follow my guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Hello and welcome. I am thrilled to have transpersonal psychologist, mind-body medicine practitioner, and trauma expert, Dr. Meg Haworth with us today. Dr. Meg, hi.
Hi, I'm so excited for this conversation. Thank you so much for having me here.
Me too. We are going to delve into healing from trauma in a big way, especially from narcissistic parents and narcissistic abuse, which is a big problem. And I got to say, probably one of the main reasons most people go to therapy. Most people have had this issue and are really struggling and trying to find a way to navigate out of painful childhoods. So we're really going to get into that. But before we do, I'm going to read a bit more about Dr. Meg, and then we will delve into our questions. Dr. Meg Haworth is a Los Angeles-based transpersonal psychologist, mind-body medicine practitioner, and she is also a fellow nutrition expert like me who helps survivors of trauma, especially narcissistic abuse, heal and reclaim their sense of wholeness. A survivor of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, and someone who has overcome more than a dozen illnesses, Dr. Meg's own story of near-death experiences, including a lightning strike, you guys, and drowning, you guys, has shaped her into a compassionate and intuitive healer. She is the creator of the whole person integration technique, a process that helps clients access and release trauma stored in the body, regulate the nervous system, and rebuild authentic identity. Dr. Meg has been featured on NBC Nightly News, the Los Angeles Times, and Hay House Radio. And you guys, is the author of 8, count them, 8 books, including the bestseller Get Well Now, Healing Yourself with Food and the Power of Mind. I'm telling you, you guys, she and I are on the same wavelength. She also hosts the Toxic Parent Recovery Summit online once a year to help people move beyond pain and recover their agency. Dr. Meg, yay, welcome.
Wow, thank you so much. Yeah, it's always so interesting hearing your own story from someone else.
Yes, I mean, you have a prolific background and we have a lot to talk about.
Yes.
I always, because it's called ANEW Insight, I always want to understand what inspired you, what gave you the insight to dedicate your practice to helping survivors of narcissistic abuse. Obviously, you have your own background. If you feel comfortable, tell us what your journey's been like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, oh my gosh, it's been a roller coaster ride. But growing up with a narcissistic parent is primarily what led me to help other people. It was interesting because I wasn't publicly talking about this, that I was doing this publicly for a very long time. But of course, people kept coming into my practice that had been through it. And I had been through it. And so I had started building this body of work and until I finally got to this place where I was like, okay, you know what? I'm ready to really talk about this publicly because it's very difficult, first of all, to see your parent as a narcissist, to accept that this is the reality, and then to talk about it publicly because of all of the silencing that gets done, the silencing, the shaming, the criticism, all of those things. So it was a lot for me to overcome personally, to professionally be able to step out there and go, look, hey, I'm a beacon of light for you. I'm here to help you with this particular issue, which is so complex and so insidious. And so that, seeing the results that would happen with my clients inspired me to say, you know what, I can't keep this under a barrel any longer. I have to get out there and just shine the light.
Yes, absolutely. As much as you feel comfortable, what did you experience as a child? How was your parent or parent How were your parents narcissistic?
Yeah, so there was a lot of shaming, guilting, very authoritarian household. Lots of the rules had rules, and you didn't know what the next rule was until the new one was broken. You didn't even know was a rule. It was just
Mhm.
constant like that. There was a lot of dismissal, or it's interesting because narcissistic parents put their kids in specific roles. They choose them for these roles, and my role tended to be either scapegoat, so I was being blamed for everything because I was the truth teller who would stand up and go, "Hey, you did this." And if you point out the truth to a narcissist, what's happening is you're disintegrating or destroying their narrative, their inner narrative that they have to tell themselves, which is a full-on fantasy of who they want to project themselves to be, but it's not who they are. So there was that, and then I was also it was either scapegoated or invisible, where I was dismissed, overlooked, neglected. It's so weird because they're right on top of you all the time, watching your every move so they can tell you what you did wrong. And then at the same time, there's no emotional connection. So neglect is massive, and it's all about the narcissistic parent. So we all had to focus on that parent, but they were so good at making it seem like it was not just them, it was the siblings, because then they pit you against each other inside of the family system. And that was, and still is, incredibly damaging. Like, trying to recover those relationships it's almost impossible unless each person does work on themselves and is really dedicating
Which
to doing
doesn't
that.
always happen for
No.
sure, especially among the narcissistic parent, most especially, but
Yeah.
really amongst the other siblings, because
Yeah.
commonly in the family system, you obviously have the scapegoat. The scapegoat is the one who always comes to therapy. That's what I
Yes.
have really
Yeah.
experienced, is that this scapegoat, who's mostly the most sensitive,
Yeah.
keenly aware, maybe even higher spiritually minded person,
Mhm.
really suffers among a system like this. Most And when you look at the other siblings, if there are other siblings,
Yeah.
there's usually one or two that are the golden children or child,
Mhm.
and they're the ones who are treated or projected upon by the narcissistic parent as the good one, and then the
Mhm.
scapegoat is the black sheep. This I
Yeah.
find, and there's a lot of crossover, I find that with children of parents who have borderline personality disorder as well. Is
Yeah.
that do you encompass that disorder in your treatment as well?
Because as a transpersonal psychologist, it's not as much about pathology and treatment of disorder. It's more about what happened to you. What are the signs and symptoms of the abuse that you're exhibiting, like the low self esteem, the lack of identity, the inability to really connect with your own self expression, who you are. It's sort of answering bigger questions. But in terms of borderline, I do see, because I am aware, of course, of those, characteristics, that there is a lot of crossover between those 2 or co-occurring.
Well, actually, what I meant were
Mm,
mostly what I see are the children, parents with perhaps that
yep,
disorder.
yep,
And I think when it comes to borderline, I think it's such a pathologized
it is.
disorder, and it really tends to cross over with persistent or chronic PTSD. And
Yeah,
I would say that that would be the disorder that I would more commonly diagnose if I had to diagnose,
yeah,
rather than borderline personality disorder. But certainly, I think the children who are born under parents with that characteristic, they also have narcissistic qualities. And that's what
yeah,
I'm wondering. So do you
yeah.
see that the crossover, not just narcissism that we're seeing, but also potentially borderline or the chronic PTSD from the parent?
Absolutely,
Yeah. Go
absolutely.
into that a little bit from
All of
what you've
those
seen.
all of those things are potentially possible because of the complexity of the abuse and the lack of physical scars and the inability to really speak up and say, in fact, you're silenced again and again. You're silenced even among your own siblings to not even check out the story that you're being told. So the complexity of what that creates inside of the individual is It's enormous. And so all of those things that you're mentioning, the borderline, that really walking between psychosis and neurosis is, and I think part of that is like the abandonment issues that come along with being narcissistically abused by your parent, where you're just, as I was saying before, where you're neglected emotionally and they're not there for you, but you have to be there for them. And it's a tremendous amount of responsibility to put on a child. You've got to take care of me. I'm the only one who really matters in the system. So you need to focus on me and my needs. And so a lot of times they'll take on that emotional impact. If you think about what that does, the complexity of the post trauma responses that you will get from that, it's extraordinary.
Yes, most often I see is people pleasing comes
Yes,
from
that's a
that
big one.
dynamic.
Yeah.
But if you could, and I think this will ring a lot of bells with people, if you could just lay out some of the potential symptoms that somebody who has suffered under narcissistic abuse would display, I think it'll ring a lot of bells with certain people. What are the
Yeah.
signs and symptoms that you have had a narcissistic abuse pattern in your life?
Yeah, and so it's a holistic issue. So it can be any one of your holistic systems: mental, emotional, physical, energetic, spiritual. The whole thing gets affected by this. So things like low self esteem and basically how you see yourself is really important. But if you're seeing yourself as you don't matter, because this is one of the big things that gets communicated to you when you have a narcissistic parent. You're not important. You don't matter. I'm the only one that matters. And so, and that you're not lovable. You're never going to get it right because you're always being thrown in the double bind, that manipulation tactic that they use constantly. The double bind basically being you can't get it right. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And so you'll recognize that you're really hard on yourself. That's a huge thing that we see. The people pleasing that you started to talk about, and what that means too is because it's wonderful if you have those qualities where you want to help other people and you genuinely care. But when you're compromising yourself to make somebody else happy, you're used to that. If you grew up
Yes.
with a narcissistic parent, that's a Tuesday.
Yes, and I
So
think it's important to distinguish that fawning or people pleasing is a trauma response, and it
yeah.
is, often employed by children who are trying whatever they can to make their environment safe, try
Mhm.
to feel loved. So I think it's important to distinguish that. But please continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that people pleasing perfectionism can be a huge thing, that because you don't ever get it right, you may start something and never complete it, or be afraid to complete it because you're also afraid of the criticism that you're going to get on the other side of completing that thing. And then because you never get it right, you're really hard on yourself. That's a huge thing I see. And a lot of aha moments with clients where they finally go, "Oh my gosh, I did not realize I was talking to myself in the exact same way that my narcissistic parent talked to me."
Mhm.
And when the light goes on and they say, "I'm cruel to me. I say horrible things to myself. I put down myself. I pick myself apart." And that's a huge warning sign that you had a narcissistic parent or somebody. It doesn't even mean they had the full-blown disorder. They may have high narcissistic tendencies, but all of those tactics that they use can potentially make you just not have any idea who you are. That's another huge thing where you feel like you're always in this identity crisis. You're always trying to fit into someone else's mold rather than, hey, what's inside of me? You may not even ever stop to ask yourself that, but that's such an important thing to do. It's a part of the healing process. It's to stand up and go, hey, who am I? Why am I here? What's the purpose of my life? What do I have to offer the world? Because the thing that doesn't happen is you don't get to individuate from the narcissistic parent. I'll see people in their 50s and 60s who still have never done that because that parent sees you as an extension of them. You're like an arm or a leg, you're a limb. So you should be able to do for them whatever they want you to do. But when you don't, whew, just the explosive behaviors that come your way for not showing up the way they told you to. But even if you do show up the way they told you to, you're gonna get it wrong.
Exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
so many of the psychological symptoms. So we see people pleasing, inability to complete projects because we're so concerned and worried. I think a hypervigilance as well,
Yeah.
just very low self esteem and
Mhm.
kind of a chronic derogatory way of talking to oneself. There's plenty more. And
Yeah.
then there are
Yeah.
like physiological signs as well.
Yeah.
What do you tend to see in your practice?
And this is where we really get deep into what I do, an emotional root cause of illness or symptoms in the body, because people tend to get physically ill from narcissistic abuse. And this was my own story.
Yes,
So,
I would love for you to
yeah,
expand upon that because you've been through the gamut.
yeah, if you're not kidding. So, stomach issues, a huge thing. People with ulcers. I was just talking to one of my clients today she's heading in that direction. Because I look at the energy field too and how the energy is being drained. Emotional energy is powerful, right?
Mhm.
Negative emotions have a lot of power to them. And so if you're being drained from that center of the body where that's your center of confidence, your center of self, your center
Mm.
who you are, you eventually your biology can't sustain itself anymore because it doesn't have enough energy available to you to be able to run your biology. So then you start to become ill. And so stomach problems, digestive issues, headaches, migraine headaches, something I had. And a lot of those have to do with thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that you're holding. And when something triggers you into that group of thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. So, for instance, every time you have a migraine, you've actually been triggered into a self abuse cycle where you believe that you're not good enough, you did it wrong, you're self criticizing, you're putting yourself down internally. And then you end up with this massive stress headache because you're self-abusing. But what you're really doing is you're turning in the words of the narcissistic parent, that programming of I'm not good enough, I never get it right. You're turning that in on yourself.
Yes. I would say too, because I treat a lot of disordered eating and eating disorders,
Oh yeah.
I see a lot of difficulties with eating coming from that. And that can run the entire spectrum of eating disorders from anorexia nervosa, where somebody has experienced just this complete disorganized detachment, narcissistic abuse,
Yeah.
tend to try to control their environment through controlling their bodies.
Yep.
Then we go all the way to the other end of the spectrum with binge eating disorders, and I see everything in between coming from
Yep.
narcissistic abuse. But on the binge eating disorder realm, I see a lot of comfort seeking and really just kind of disappearing and just dissociating out of what they're experiencing through food. You also
Mhm.
are interested in and practicing in nutrition. Do you see that in your practice as well?
All the time. Yeah, it's such a common thing to see that relationship with food or alcohol is another one, which of course, because a lot of people come to me because of weight gain and they start to put together, oh, weight and emotions. Oh, those are really interconnected and I want to stop emotionally eating, that kind of thing. So yeah, I do see that a lot. And then it's interesting too because narcissistic parents can do very strange things with food.
Yes. Go
They
into that, please. I see that
yeah,
all the time. What are
yeah.
some of the things that they usually do with food that you're seeing and
Well,
hearing about in your practice?
you may have been force fed as a child. Many
Mhm.
children are force fed by narcissistic parents. You're wrong. You wouldn't be listening to your body and saying, "You know what? I'm full and I'm ready to stop." It's them. So they're going to they're going to decide how much is enough for you. Then they may be force feeding. And if you think about the emotional um, relationship you start to develop with food because of that. Another thing they may do is they may cut you down because you're just weighing too much. Those jeans are really tight on you. You're really carrying a lot more weight than you should. And so they may withhold food from you. And they'll withhold the food. Sometimes I've seen them lock the food up so they can't even get to the food. So then now they're being because it's all about control, right? Narcissistic abuse is control. And so they're trying to control how much you get, when you get it. I've seen that happen. And another thing, they'll put you down for your weight, even though you're probably just right, or
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
even too thin. And then they'll make brownies, and then they'll come at you with this brownie and put it in your face. "Come on, just try some, just it's okay. You could go run it off," or whatever. All those confusing messages with the things that they do with food.
Yes,
So
I've seen in some of my clients being weighed and measured in certain times to make sure that they're in the proper category and things like that. There's just
yeah.
so many ways that food is used as a weapon or your weight is used as a weapon with narcissistic parents. Let's actually look at narcissistic adults, like people who are getting into these abusive relationships.
Yeah,
What are some subtle red flags, and maybe not so subtle because there's both, of
yeah.
someone who might be being abused by a narcissist in their adult life?
Yeah, so some of them are something called covert gaslighting, where the narcissistic person will start to say things. It's just after you go through that love bombing stage and you're totally mad about this person who you think is the best fit in the whole world, like, wow, and then they start
And go into
picking.
that more. What's the love bombing? A lot of people don't understand what that is, and they get sucked into that because they're
Yeah.
not seeing it for what it is. So let's help people recognize what love bombing is first.
Yeah, and this would start in the dating phases of the relationship where they tend to move it very quickly. And like, "Oh my gosh, you're the most amazing person I've ever met. Was so incredible." And they do this thing called mirroring where they'll ask you a question and then agree with you and tell you exactly that's exactly what they want. Like, "Oh, how many kids do you want?" "Well, I would really love to have 2." "Really? Me too." Exactly. And so you think they're listening to you and you think that they're engaging with you and that they're just like this perfect mirror image of you. And you're just like, wow, I finally found my soulmate. This is incredible. We're so aligned in every single area, which is not a realistic relationship. It feels really good. And so they
Mhm.
get you really hooked in. And then they start to do things like covert gaslighting. What they'll say things like, you're just too sensitive.
That's a
No,
number
right?
one thing I hear.
Yeah,
Keep
you're
going.
just too sensitive or make you doubt your reality so you're sharing a story, like the story of how you met. "Oh, no, it didn't happen like that." So they'll put down what you're sharing, but not only that, they may completely say that what you're sharing, "That never happened." I don't know, "That never happened." And so then you start doubting your reality. And that's something that they want you to do is to doubt your reality because that helps them to gain and maintain control over you because that's the number one thing that a narcissistic person wants and needs to do.
Mhm.
So then they're just wearing away at you one cut at a time where you start to think, am I crazy? Did that really happen? And then they isolate you and they start doing that by like, you're out at a party, you've met your friends for the first time, you'd had a really great time, you thought. You get in the car on the way home, and he's like, "I don't know about that one friend of yours. Did you notice how she blah, blah, blah?" And so then they start cutting down your friends, and so then they're trying to isolate you. And then you may feel like at first you'll feel like, "Oh, wow, just us, and what a beautiful thing we're forming together. That we get to be so close, just the 2 of us, and no one understands us," and that kind of thing. So you get into this sort of dreamy fantasy world that they create,
Mhm.
and then they start taking you out of your world that you had already created, you
Yes,
know?
I think that when we look at the honeymoon phase, that is the most intoxicating part of the
Yeah,
relationship and why people will tend to stay in these narcissistic abusive relationships because they equate the person in the honeymoon phase as that person
yeah,
rather than the abusive person. And the abuse, like you said, can run from anything from gaslighting, isolating, cutting you down, wearing away your self esteem to even physical and further emotional abuse. But as
right.
soon as the love bombing starts again, the person is intoxicated again. And they tend to think, well, this is just who he is. And that the other times, no, though, that's not really him. He was just under stress. You tend to make excuses. And I think we need to look at that with no judgment at all. Usually, a person who might fall into that may have experienced that in
Uh-huh.
childhood, and
Yep.
that might be what feels familiar and feels right. Oh my gosh, I can't even believe we're out of time for this half. I haven't even asked the questions I really want to ask. So we're going to come back for part 2 because we really want to get into the whole person technique. We want to get more into the body
Yeah.
and how the body is, trauma is stored in the body and how we can help people release that stored trauma. So, you guys, you got to come back. This is an incredibly insightful episode where we're learning about narcissistic abuse and how we can navigate ourselves out of this. So, Dr. Meg, you'll come join me again. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you guys for tuning in and tune in for the second half of this incredible interview with transpersonal psychologist, mind body medicine practitioner, and trauma expert, Dr. Meg Haworth. Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Insight Podcast. Please remember the contents shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Insight Podcast tab. And follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.